For up-to-the-minute news and unbiased reporting, check out dailybugle.net. Here's J. Jonah Jameson with a few words.
Tragedy! What else can I call it? What more need be said? The damage. The destruction. You've been hearing it with your own ears for 50 episodes from James B. and Eddie on Let's Read Spider-Man!
Let's read Spider-Man! Let's read Spider-Man! Spider-Man! Spider-Man!
Welcome, True Believer readers, to another episode of Let's Read Spider-Man. And here's the guy that never watches the movies, my ignorant friend Eddie. How you doing, Eddie?
I'm doing well. You know, I don't usually watch movies, but I have taken the time to watch many Spider-Man movies since now we're doing so much stuff about Spider-Man, James B.
Yeah, our podcast makes us look like we know what we're doing, so we have to.
Well, we are experts in one very, at least for me, very small area.
Well, if there are 800 amazing Spider-Man books, and we've done about 80, so we're like experts in the first 10%. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're actually not going to talk about the books really at all. This is our 50th episode. How you feel about that?
Very excited about our 50th episode. We've had so many good guests, and it's been fun.
So, Eddie, for number 50, there's a movie that just came out. I'm not sure if you've heard about it. It was called Spider-Man No Way Home. Did you happen to see it?
I rushed out to go see it with my daughters. We were all very excited.
Great. I also saw it, and so did a lot of our guests. And what we did is, while we were recording episodes with our guests over the last 7 or 8 episodes, we took the time to ask them some of their thoughts. And instead of just me and you talking about what we think about the No Way Home movie, instead, we're going to talk about what we think about it and include some insight from 5 of our great guests that we had recently. What do you think about that?
I really like this idea, James B. It gives such a good idea of what all of our friends who know a lot about Spider-Man think about this very recent and critical piece of Spider-Man history.
Eddie, I don't know if you realize this, but there was a good solid 2 hours of commentary of us talking to our guests about the movie. And I just tried to pick, what I could to put in here. Remember, we only have a 30-minute podcast.
That's right. A very strict time limit too, James B. Well, I appreciate you slogging through all of our. I'm sure there was plenty of nonsense in there to find a good episode for everybody to listen to.
Yeah, it wasn't as much nonsense as you think. I kind of was disappointed that I couldn't put it all in here. All right, so in Spider-Man No Way Home, the synopsis is as follows. 1 week after Quentin Beck's attacks in Europe and subsequent framing of Spider-Man for his murder, Spider-Man's civilian identity as Peter Parker is revealed to the world. Parker and MJ flee to his apartment, reuniting with his Aunt May and Happy Hogan. With the apartment surrounded by the Department of Damage Control, Parker, MJ, Aunt May, and Ned Leeds are interrogated but ultimately released without charge, with Peter's name eventually being cleared with the help of Matt Murdock. Parker, MJ, and Leeds return to high school, but the university applications are rejected due to the recent controversy. Eddie, Peter is not charged in the death of Quentin Beck. Now, we don't see the whole trial, but what do you think about that?
I found this to be very confusing because it seems like a huge thing. And I guess all I ended up coming to the conclusion is that Matt Murdock is a very, very good lawyer because he got him off the hook for that. Do you have any insight into it, James B?
Well, I was thinking kind of the opposite. What was the reason why we thought he killed Quentin Beck? It's because Quentin Beck put a video out saying, this guy's going to kill me. Maybe that just wasn't enough evidence. Like if someone says, hey, this guy's going to kill me, and then that person dies, does it automatically mean they killed them? Right? I mean, just thinking it was kind of a shaky case to begin with, right?
I think so. There's a lot of confusion going on, and I think it was apparent that Quentin Beck was not a hero. Mysterio was quite the villain in Spider-Man: Far From Home. So there was enough ambiguity there to have a hung jury, I think.
One thing they mentioned was that he says, well, ask Nick Fury about it. He was there, which would have cleared him, right? Nick Fury
Right.
can clear him. But then he's like, well, Nick Fury's off world. I would like to assume that they reached Nick Fury, and Nick Fury's like, well, actually, I had a scroll, and he can confirm it. That's probably how he got off, right? He wasn't really guilty. That's why he got off. In the second section, Peter goes and sees Doctor Strange. He tells him to cast a spell to make sure people forget he's Spider-Man. Wong's there. He says this is a bad idea. Doctor Strange casts a spell. Peter messes it up by getting really involved in some ridiculous reasons why he can't have certain people in there. It gets really weak when he talks about his aunt. He's like, oh, it was really hard when I had to go through it. I don't want to have to repeat that again. So one thing about casting that spell was, should he or shouldn't be doing that. Our good friend Sarah Pezel had something to say about that. So I'm going to play a little bit about what Sarah said.
I thought it was interesting how, and it was even brought up in the movie, how Peter Parker, instead of just talking to MIT about his admissions and MJ's and Ned's, that he just goes immediately to Doctor Strange to try to change time. And I just thought that was a funny thing, because it's like, that's what I was thinking too, as he was walking up to Doctor Strange's place, like, oh yeah, this is the first solution I've come to. So I thought that was cool how they, poked a little fun about that.
Eddie, what'd you think of Sarah's comments on that?
I thought she was spot on through that section right there. Them not getting into college is kind of the catalyst for Peter to go seek out Doctor Strange. And I just can't imagine a college not wanting Spider-Man and his friends at it. It seems so unreasonable. Celebrities are always getting into all sorts of colleges because, well, that's what college is.
Yeah, but he's
like,
like
right?
he's like a murderer during the application process, isn't he? That's the problem. And now here's a quick sponsor. It's thedailybugle.net.
Spider Menace. Governments around the world launch investigations to the murderer known as Spider-Man. To find out more, log into dailybugle.net. And now, back to the summary. Here's James B.
Peter goes and finds the woman via help from his best friend, Flash. And he finds the woman on the bridge, and Otto Octavius shows up, and, he puts his hand on Peter, and then the Iron Spider suit bonds with the mechanical tentacles, and all that craziness goes on. What do you think of that whole sequence?
I mean, first off, and I'm sure one of our guests mentions it, Otto Octavius looks really good for in real life. The actor being 20 years older now. It's amazing, striking how much he looks just like he did the first day he was in a Spider-Man film. But it's interesting to see the new technology that Peter got from Tony Stark kind of take over Otto's tentacles there, and I couldn't understand how he was going to get out of it until that very moment at that point. So clearly Doc Ock is just as dangerous as he always was. I like that for sure. He can go toe to toe with Spider-Man. And
years ago, Eddie, that would have been a massive part of the movie, like the big battle on the bridge with Doc Ock. And in this movie, it's almost a forgettable scene from all the things that are going to happen later. People are like, oh yeah, there was a fight in the beginning of the movie. I forgot all about it. But Doc Ock comes back later when, he becomes very important, where they go to the apartment, which is Happy's apartment. There's a little funny sequence there where Happy says, like, why are these people going to my house? And he cures Doc Ock in this apartment. What'd you think of that whole sequence when they were trying to hang out in the apartment and trying to mix the cures with all the guys there?
I mean, it's some great comedy, right, James B? Them all together at that spot. And then this cure is so curious. Like, I guess they're all, suffering from something, driving them to be villains. And the thought that for Doc Ock, it's just a mechanical thing. Like, let's replace a computer chip and you're better. You're a good guy now.
Yeah, that was I think that's the easiest one to cure, because I think as a viewer of that movie, we all knew that that little chip broke, and then he lost control, because he tells you in the first
Right.
movie, or
Mm-hmm.
he tells you in his movie, hey, this little thing here keeps me in control, and then when it breaks, he's no longer in control of anything. Easy fix there, and of course things go badly, and we know that the Goblin doesn't like how things going. He's not willing to give up who he is at that moment, because the Goblin persona takes over Osborn before the cure can be administered. He then manipulates Electro into removing the device that Parker put on him, and everything kind of gets out of control there. That's when Aunt May has her moment there, and we have comments from our good friend Kevin Ewing about how he felt with the death of Aunt May.
The emotion in the movie, when Aunt May said those magic words of "with great power," I audibly gasped, and my wife told me afterward that how loud of a noise I made when she said that, because I knew what was coming after that too, and the tears were rolling down the eyes at Aunt May's death.
Eddie, Kevin wasn't the only one who felt that way. How'd you feel about the Aunt May sequence?
Very emotional sequence. I think it was important too, because Peter had to lose someone, just like all the Spider-Mans have lost someone.
The return of we'll call them the other Spider-Men, being Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, that's obviously the big part of this movie. It was a little bit spoiled by people who watched any of the trailers or just followed what's going on in the news. But we have some feedback on that from our good friend Travis Bowe from the Marvel Events Timeline podcast. Here's Travis.
All of the Spider-Man movies exist now as part of this franchise. I think I'm really nervous that Marvel is going to try and do this again, and I don't think they should. With as much emphasis as they've placed on the multiverse now, especially with Doctor Strange's new movie coming out, with the reality warping things that Scarlet Witch has kind of done, I do not want the Fox X-Men stuff rolled into the MCU. I don't want that Fantastic Four stuff in the MCU. I think it worked for Spider-Man, and I'd like them to leave it at that. But I really enjoyed the movie.
I'm a huge fan of time travel. I love the Back to the Future franchise, and I love how they handled Endgame getting the Infinity Stones, but I could see how this could get out of hand, so I understand what Travis is talking about. But he did really enjoy the movie. Another person who really enjoyed the movie is Sarah, who we've heard from earlier, and I wanted to make sure I played this when she's very excited, describing because she's a big Spider-Man fan, and her opportunity to see all three Spider-Men on the screen at the same time. So once again, here's Sarah.
In the middle-ish part of the movie, I really loved all three Spider-Men in the movie at the same time. My favorite, people always ask me, which Spider-Man do you like the most? Toby, Andrew, or Tom. And it's cool to just not have to worry about that, because all three of them are in the same movie. I loved the Amazing Spider-Man 2 costume. They even updated it a little bit from what I could see. The way that the three of them interacted with each other was also quite funny to me, especially Andrew Garfield and him talking about, like, oh, I always wish I had brothers, and him cracking Tobey Maguire's back. Like,
Right.
it was so goofy and so a little awkward, and just so Spider-Man to me, just to see that interaction.
We're going to move on with the summary now. Actually, before we talk about what happens after we meet the Spider-Man, do you want to throw in a comment or two, Eddie?
I don't think I have anything to add right there particularly.
Okay. All right. Here's some comments about battling the villains and Peter's decision on not pushing the button. This is, once again, Sarah Pezel.
What'd you think about Spider-Man's decision to not push the button?
I think that's what I agree with that. I think that's what he would have done, like, regardless of if they're villains or not, right? Or if they're even his problem or not. They're in his universe. They are worth saving because they are people, not villain first or whatever else they may happen to be. And also, I think Aunt May saying that, really hit that home for Peter, although he did have his doubts.
And a lot of people wanted to talk about the end of the movie, so we're going to give you 3 sound bites in a row from 3 different guests. First, it will be my daughter, who has the same last name as me, and we are related. Then it'll be Chris Ewing, followed by Kevin Ewing, who does have the same last name as Chris Ewing, but they are not related. Here are Samantha, followed by Chris, followed by Kevin. And I'm here with my daughter, Samantha, who was on the podcast. Samantha, what did you think of the ending of No Way Home?
I was very sad that Peter decided not to tell MJ and Ned what had happened. He sees that they got into MIT, they're happy. He notices MJ's cut on her forehead and her saying it doesn't hurt anymore, and he decides not to tell them. I was pretty upset, but I am hoping that in the future he seeks them out. I did notice MJ was still wearing the necklace that he gave her, so I'm hopeful for the future.
I like the fact that it ends with him in an apartment that is very, very similar to the one that Toby had, including the guy saying the rent's due on the first of the month.
Right. I wanted Ursula to show up with the cake, though. I was waiting for her.
The fact that it was a one room, sink in the corner kind of decrepit New York place,
and he has the scanner on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He has a scanner, that's like just in case you weren't sure.
Well, and there was also the issue of, I think people were concerned that they're setting up Peter to be the new Tony Stark in some fashion and having access to all the technology. And meanwhile, they've wiped all that out, right? So now Peter, no one knows Peter is Spidey, so he no longer has access to any Stark stuff. Plus, they've also set up armor wars with the fact that the Department of Damage Control was taking all the Stark tech out of Stark Enterprises as part of this investigation into the drones and Mysterio. So now, Damage Control has this technology, which will probably get stolen or lost or whatever, giving you the Armor Wars series they're going to have on Disney Plus, I think, next year.
Let's go back to the what you said about the Tony Stark's glasses. Break it down for me what you believe is going on with them and Peter's ability to use or not use them and where they are. What's going on with that?
Well, it seemed like they were confiscated from the apartment because when the police and the things came through the apartment, they were grabbing all of this stuff, and there was a little evidence tag next to Edith.
Okay.
And beyond that, there was a comment at one point from his suit that the Stark network was offline. So whether the network's offline or Peter's lost a connection to it, and then by the film's end, he no longer has the nano suit anymore, and it looks like he's sewing something himself to make a new Spidey suit, which I think also for Peter is going to be a big change because he's been relying on Tony's kind of technological suits to do different kinds of webs and different kind of technology in his spider arms, and now he's got to actually rely on Peter Parker to do all the stuff.
And the very end, when Peter kind of transitions from the MCU Spider-Man to the real, quote unquote, real Marvel Spider-Man, in that final swing where he has the traditional suit on, the comic accurate suit, and he's kind of on his own. He's an adult now, doesn't have as many friends as he used to rely on. It was just perfect.
Speaking of perfect, it's a perfect time for another sponsor break. For up-to-the-minute news and unbiased reporting, check out dailybugle.net. Here's J. Jonah Jameson with a few words.
Peter Parker, the web-headed war criminal, who for years has been terrorizing the decent citizens of New York, has done as much damage as this podcast. Do not listen to James B. and Eddie because they promote Spider-Man.
And thank you to our sponsor, thedailybugle.net. Now back to the podcast. So, Eddie, the only thing kind of left at the end might be the little sequence with Venom. And I know a lot of people are disappointed that they're not going to use Eddie Brock, per se, as Venom in this world. And that's kind of what, and I got to be honest, I didn't even like understand it at first. I just saw it, and then I had to read on the internet like, this is what this means. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't even put two and two together. I'm willing to admit my ignorance, but since we've sort of covered everything and we've had our guests contribute, we have time kind of for your final thoughts on either one particular scene or just the overall feeling you felt about No Way Home.
I appreciated James B. chance to talk about it here at the end. I think there's so many great things about this movie as like not a superhero movie. You know, sometimes I'm bothered by these superhero movies in that they're not particularly good movies, but you know, we're going to go see them because it's exciting to see our favorite comic book characters come to life. Doctor Strange, you know, I always call him Cumberbund because I forget his last name, but he is just so fantastic. And his interaction with both Wong in this, Doctor Strange and Wong, and then Doctor Strange, Wong, and Peter Parker, I just really like the scene. And at first, you know, the whole spell casting, I thought like Doctor Strange would never do this. It's such a weak, you know, idea that he's just gonna let Peter change the whole world so his life can be better. But honestly, the interaction between Wong and him shows that he's petulant about not having his status that he had before he was blipped. And I really think he cast the spell both to like help Peter, but also just because he wants to irk Wong and kind of the community in general because he's been belittled in that scene. And he plays that so well, like in my opinion. It's just very clear that there's several reasons that he's casting the spell, not just to help Peter Parker. So, like, as a movie, like a movie, I really enjoyed this movie. It's a great, you know, just film, we could say. And then it just ties together and wraps up all the Spider-Man movies so nicely. It's very satisfying. I was very pleased with it overall.
Yeah, I remember thinking at the end that this was like watching like an epic tale to me. I felt like it was such a big film, bigger than any of the other ones by themselves. It was sort of like when you sit down and you watch like a Lord of the Rings, or just even something, when I say epic, like watching like a Forrest Gump, just like a tale that takes place bigger than just the little story being told. Like the end of this, I thought like, wow, this was really powerful. I'll cover just some little things that nobody else talks about. I like that Flash's hair is turning blonde. That's definitely intentional. I liked when he goes to the school and they have a little shrine for him. And one of the teachers is talking about, oh, the students made the shrine. The other one's like, no, he made the shrine for you. And the other teacher's saying like, you're a killer. You know, I thought that was like, they made sure they covered all those little moments. You know, the relationship with Happy and Aunt May, just making sure that they kept covering all that stuff at the same time. There's just a lot of little pieces that I thought were really well done and tied together. And I don't know, they just did a nice job. I mean, famously, you know, on the internet, there's the meme of the three Spider-Men pointing. And there was a scene when Ned comes in, he's like, Peter. And they're all like, who? Peter. And he's like, Peter Parker. And they're always pointing at each other, you know, just to do all those silly things, you know. Can you get the cobweb in the corner? You know, they kept the fun Spider-Man stuff going on at the same time with telling the big story at the same. I just think it was really well done. And I think I can't believe there's many haters, and it's not going to get a lot of positive reviews on IMDb and other sites.
Yeah, James B. Great.
So, all right. Well, that's all we have time for today. You can send us your comments at letsreadspiderman@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter at Let's Read Spidey. Eddie will tell you how to find us on Facebook.
You can find us on Facebook at Let's Read Spider-Man. I'm Eddie, Peter Parker Hassbatcher on Facebook. Anytime.
And remember, listeners,
you're allowed to take a break from reading Silver Age Spider-Man to watch epic Spider-Man movies.
Or to listen to Let's Read Spider-Man podcasts. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
talking about Daredevil. So I'll give him we're probably after the credits now.
I know you like Daredevil, so
Yeah, that was my biggest. That was like the biggest part of the whole movie for me is that Daredevil was in the movie. I mentioned to you that I was in the theater a couple days in, and I was losing my mind that Daredevil was in the movie because I didn't know, and like me and one other person were clapping because all the diehards had probably already seen it on opening night. I thought that was a huge deal, tying him back in as well.
Yeah, they tied so many things in. It's just so well done. Bringing all those Spider-Man together from ancient franchises, so impressive. Very clever. I don't know. My wife was sad at the end. She was like, I don't like that ending. I don't like Spider-Man being lonely.
One thing I noticed was that the Lizard and the Sandman were mostly CGI, and they had very weak storylines. They were just in there to be in there as well. I mean, this was really, the Goblin was the most important one they needed, followed probably by Doc Ock and Electro, because Electro got to actually be good in this movie where he was kind of weird in his last movie.
Agreed. Particularly Sandman, you really had to have some background knowledge to like understand what he was doing and why, because it's confusing. And then the Lizard, I mean, the movie Lizard is just so bad. I know the Lizard can be bad, but I dislike the movie Lizard.
Yeah, he wasn't even, I don't even know, the Lizard, I couldn't even tell if what he was doing. He was, he seemed sort of
when
in
did he
control.
get captured? Like Doctor Strange captured him, right? And that was it.
Yeah, I don't even remember. So pretty weak. So, well, this was a good episode for number 50. It was good timing for that.
Yeah.
So, oh, you know what? We should do some sort of 50th episode close of some sort. Okay, so here we go. Eddie, as we wrap up our 50th episode, which is crazy to me, I'd like to thank, first of all, our guests, who are people who took a chance to use their time to come join us on the show. It's weird because we don't see our guests in person. Through episode 50, we've never seen a single ever guest.
Yeah. We don't even see each other, James.
We don't even see each other. And here are these guests. Most of them we do not know at all. Many of them, the first time we've ever heard their voice is when they join in on our Clean Feed audio link. And I want to thank them because they're taking their time to be a part of our show and to make our show better. I think that's something I wanted to bring up on our 50th episode. How about you, Eddie?
I'm so happy that our listeners are reading Spider-Man and using our episodes. Several of them have said this as kind of a read-along where you can hear people discuss and think about the issues that you're reading in Silver Age Spider-Man. And that those listeners, too, are also helping us shape the show. We've had several listeners write in with segments that we decided to include. We're really open to that and meeting people who are interested in the same thing that we are, which is early Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man comics.
And lastly, I wanted to mention there are a lot of podcasts out there, way more informative than ours, and there's definitely a lot that are way funnier than ours. We're trying to hit that balance of an informative podcast that's funny, and that's what we strive for. I think you and I blend pretty well, Eddie, and one of us is serious, the other one can be a little silly, and vice versa.
Yes, James B., you're exactly right. And of course, I'm always happy to talk to you about Spider-Man and hang out with you, just like we used to do in the library at school.
Eddie, you should set a goal by the time you get to our 100th podcast that you own one Spider-Man book, please.
All right, James B., will do.
If you would like to be a guest on our show, reach out to us at letsreadspiderman@gmail.com or on Twitter at letsreadspidey. Also, special thanks this episode to my daughter Samantha and our friends Chris Ewing, Kevin Ewing, Sarah Pezel, and Travis Bow for their feedback. This is the end of episode 50. We have some great podcasts coming up. In episode 51, we're going to have 2 guests at the same time and do a crossover with their show. And then we're going to come right back with another guest for episode 52, who's going to join us to rank the top 3 supporting characters through the first 78 books. All that and more is coming up in the next episodes of Let's Read Spider-Man.
The youth of this nation must learn to respect real heroes, men such as my son, John Jameson, the test pilots, not selfish freaks, such as Spider-Man, a masked menace, who refuses to even let us know his true identity.